What's the work there?
This is not a journey that leads to a destination.
I know I had something really important to do.
Adapt more rapidly. Oh, well,
Can I just stop you there and ask?
Our perspective is that it's absolutely not a trade-off. It's deeply additive. That's a good question, Danny.
Welcome back to the D3 mission log. We're well into 2021. We're not going to discuss the news, but obviously things are looking up for the clean energy transition, and we need to work out how to accelerate it, which is why we're bringing you this video learning journey on a weekly basis with the world's largest clean tech accelerator program and its manager, Bryan, who's going to share some lessons learned. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the challenges of sort of equity in and equity out in the program design and build. We want to be global. We want to be diverse. We want to use the energy transition that we're driving to uplift all communities and bring benefits to everyone, especially those that have historically been left out by the fossil fuel energy systems of the 20th century, or even worse, completely depressed and oppressed by them. And so, some of this journey is about working out how do we do diversity in the selection process, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, but also ensure the equitable outcomes, the inclusive outcomes, justice, for want of a better word. So, Bryan, tell us about that part of the learning journey.
Yeah, and I guess let me be very clear that we are very early in the stages of this journey. And when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, this is not a journey that leads to a destination at which we'll kind of pat ourselves on the back at some point and say, mission accomplished, move on. It's probably a journey we'll always be on, but a very worthy one. Because exactly to your point, Danny, if we do this right, we have an opportunity not only to ensure that the most promising climate tech reaches the markets, but to ensure that it reaches the most vulnerable communities and that those members of those communities actually are able to participate in the greatest financial opportunity of our time as well. Often people think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as some kind of trade-off. We have to do this, or we have to do that, and it's a net sum zero game. And our perspective is that it's absolutely not a trade-off. It's deeply additive. In fact, if we do it right, it's incredibly supportive of our mission. So that's a lot of our focus right now. I've mentioned in previous episodes that we were really eager to get some points on the board and kind of get going and start learning so that we can adapt more rapidly rather than trying to get everything perfect right off the bat. And that's what we've done. So we're trying to approach this challenge and opportunity with humility, trying to recognize what we don't know, but also with the same ambition and scope and scale and speed that affects everything else that we do, because there is such a significant opportunity here. I've mentioned in a previous discussion that one of our key first steps is really to expand our networks. We're an organization built on networks of startups, of corporate partners, of investors, of policymakers, and we need to expand our networks for hiring, for recruiting and building people onto our own team. It's going to be hard for us, I think, to be very effective at diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice without some good representation on our team. And we have some good steps there, but a lot of room for improvement. But more broadly, I think we necessarily need to expand our networks to make sure that each of our sets of stakeholders is kind of representative and brings a diverse perspective to the work that we're doing.
Can I just stop you there and ask the obvious question, which is, we're two white guys talking about it. So it starts from the inside out, as far as I can tell. What are we doing at the team level to diversify? How is that reflected already? And before we talk about the networks and other stakeholders in the third derivative ecosystem, what's the work there?
Yeah, so we kind of think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice at kind of three levels. One is, our mission and mission fulfillment, which is what I've been discussing so far. Another is kind of the actual makeup of our team itself. And here, like I was just running the numbers last week, we've made 7 full-time job offers since we kind of kicked off third derivative several months ago. Of those 7 job offers, 5 have been to women, 2 have been to men, 4 have been to BIPOC candidates, 3 have been to white candidates. So, and that's not through any kind of tokenism per se. It's been through explicitly and intentionally seeking out diverse candidate pools, because there are amazingly talented people of every kind of background and experience set kind of out there. And we really don't buy the excuse that, oh, well, our applicant pool wasn't very diverse, so we're just kind of stuck with what we had. That said, we have a lot of room for improvement. And we are proactively working with the organizations that support us, like RMI and New Energy Nexus, to make sure that our recruiting pipelines are tied in with historically Black colleges and universities, that we're seeking out candidates not just from kind of the typical privileged networks that have historically kind of populated these organizations as well, to make sure that we have a more equity coming in, and to your point, then we'll have more kind of opportunity for equity coming out as well.
Can I just note that there's another level, which is the global dimension. Like you are a global purpose organization, and how are we going to mix up the sort of internationalization of the crew too?
Yeah, so I think that as a team, that's probably the biggest gap that we've identified. We have these very global aspirations, but right now as a team, we're very North America centric. As a broader ecosystem, although we have a number of global corporates and global investors on board, we still are pretty heavily weighted in North America and Europe, let's say, as well. So we have a couple of kind of dimensions of work here. One is really just activating our networks. We've been underutilizing our New Energy Nexus network, for example, where the management team is kind of distributed around the world, where there are employees kind of operating in parts of Asia and Africa as well. We've just been so kind of focused and burdened kind of getting our initial product out the door that we haven't taken the time to pull our heads up and make sure that the low-hanging fruit of networks that we're already plugged into is really activated. And we're also intending to start hiring more globally as well, to make sure that when we are trying to find ways to work with startups and partners in other parts of the world, that we have perspective from that part of the world represented on our team.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is rich ground to traverse, and we should keep coming back to it regularly, because it is such an important part of the mission and vision of the thing. So really appreciate the open talk. Any last thoughts on the big work of JEDI, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion? There, I said it, the acronym that is starting to circulate, the mindset that we need to cultivate, and the practices and mastery we need to develop.
Yeah, so as I said, we really think of it in at three levels. One is our mission fulfillment, one is the actual representation of our team, and the other is kind of the education and actions of our team. And so we've been taking a lot of time to try to educate ourselves, expand our horizons, both based on shared learnings and perspectives that are already represented on the team, but also, with external facilitators and subject matter experts to come in and help us kind of think about things in different ways. Again, let me be clear that we are very early in this journey. So I don't mean for any of this to sound like, we've arrived, we've figured it all out. But one of the very tangible first actions just came out last week was we had a team of people evaluating the language that we use, both internally and externally, specifically around the term emerging markets, where we believe that the term emerging markets is kind of centered on more kind of colonial narratives that there are Western markets, or there are developed markets, and then there are these others that are somehow kind of inferior and are just coming out to be, whereas they have their own rich histories and cultures that have led to them being where they are and where they're headed. So we've agreed as a group to start aiming for specificity. So we don't use the term emerging markets. If we try to speak collectively, we'll say Asia, Africa, and Latin America. As you know, as well as any of us, even those are very broad strokes, right? Speaking about Asia as if, China and India are the same, or speaking about Africa as in West Africa and South Africa and East Africa are the same is sort of absurd. So we're really aiming for specificity and also going the other direction. So not speaking about things in terms of Western markets and Asia, Africa, and Latin America, but speaking about North America and Europe and Asia and Africa and Latin America as an attempt really to decenter the conversation from North America and Europe and recognize that all markets are out there. They all have things that are special and unique and interesting and compelling about them. And we need to be focused on all of them if we're going to solve climate.
Great example. Decentering a language is really good example of what we can do. Okay. Well, just before we finish up here, what's the startup of the week?
Yeah, so really excited to feature Gricd this week. Nigerian startup doing IoT cold chain. Moving things that require cold is really challenging in all parts of the world, maybe and especially in Africa. Things are often hot. Some of the infrastructure around being able to maintain coldness and being able to verify it over time isn't terribly mature. So they've built out an entire platform that helps you kind of track and ensure that things that need to stay cold over the course of a journey. That's already probably very important, but especially right now while we're trying to distribute vaccines around the entire world and around entire continents that need to remain cold. All of a sudden, they were just featured in CNN last week as a critical kind of tool in the toolkit for ways that we might be able to increase not just the speed, but the kind of efficacy and reduce spoilage of vaccine distribution throughout Africa.
Wonderful. We'll put a link in the video posting here for the third derivative mission log, but just to repeat, so it's a Nigerian company focused on the cold chain, as we call it, the industrial transport of things like food and vaccines in a hyper efficient way. How big is that opportunity, Bryan, from a sort of climate solutions point of view? Are we seeing huge gains here?
That's a good question, Danny. I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but as a society, we devote obscene amounts of energy to keeping things cold. And some of that is to keeping things cold in stasis, so keeping an apartment or a building cold in a hot climate. But an awful lot of it goes to keeping things cold that are in transit, growing crops in one part of the world where they're able to grow during this time of the year, and then keeping them cold for days or sometimes weeks at a time so they can go reach other parts of the world who don't have access to those crops during that time of year. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is a staggering amount of energy that we spend, and of course, emissions associated with that energy as well. So if we can reduce spoilage, if we can make those processes more efficient, we actually can move the needle pretty substantially on our climate fight.
Great. Thank you for that. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but thank you, Bryan, for another great lesson here at the D3 mission log. Tune in next week for more from the learning journey with Third Derivative, the world's largest climate tech accelerator.
And thanks everyone for joining us on this journey.